Hello legends. In this video, I'm going to show you the top 5 most used nodes in n8n and then explain to you how to use them. So how do I actually know what the top 5 nodes are? Well, n8n makes their 4,743 workflows publicly available on their template page. So I was able to pull out all those workflows, bring them into Cursor, and then run an analysis on them. Actually, I got more than 4,700. Let me just run this script and show you how many I have. Let me just zoom in. So out of all the workflows that I had, I was able to bring out 5,700 workflows. Now that's actually 1,000 more than what n8n makes publicly available, which means somehow I've got an extra 1,000 workflows to play around with. So this script also pulls out for us what the top 10 most common nodes are. We have sticky notes, we have HTTP nodes, which is the API call, a set node, code node, if node. And for this video, we're just focusing on these 5, but we also have the Google Sheets node, the AI agent node, the OpenAI AI agent node, a manual trigger, which is just to start the workflow, and then the Telegram node as well. So if you end up liking this video and you want to see a part 2, let me know and I can record something for these 5 nodes as well. But for now, let's just go onto the canvas with these first 5. So we're across in n8n, and let's actually bring a sticky note onto the canvas. And I mean, this is a really good example of already why a sticky note is one of the most popular nodes. You can see here it's been used 22,000 times across those 5,700 workflows, whereas the next most used is 7,000 times with the HTTP node. So there are 3 times more sticky nodes to HTTP nodes, and I think this really comes down to like the power of the sticky note. And it seems a little bit silly because it's not really part of any workflow. It doesn't actually, process logic. It's not an actual API call, but I think in some cases it's just as powerful. So the first use case is actually stemming from collaboration. So n8n itself allows you to share workflows and also have multiple people working on a workflow at one time. So when you share a workflow, especially if you go to like n8n and you download something, it's very common for you to get a sticky note that has a set of instructions on the left-hand side that explain, hey, make sure you set up this credential, make sure you plug this thing into that thing. And it basically gives you an instruction guide of how to get the workflow running. Now, if you're collaborating with different people on a workflow, and let's say you have something like built out like this, you have a trigger node, you might have an AI agent node, which by the way, this is that first AI agent that we saw over here. That's the LangChain AI agent. And just to show you the OpenAI agent, that's going to be this one over here. So we go AI, then we have OpenAI and message and assistant. So these are both the AI agent nodes that we just saw. But let's say you're building out a workflow and you're like halfway through and you're going to be handing this off to your, to someone else to help build out the workflow. You might actually put a sticky note at a certain part and just say like, oh, I'm stuck here. I need help with this part. So if you ever get stuck, you might also use the sticky note if you want to get assistance with a specific workflow. So let's say we get a switch over here. And for my specific use case, let me just bring in add a routing rule, route 1, rename to route 2. And let's say while I'm building this thing out, I know what I want to do for route 1. So I might go to a code node. But then for route 2, I actually have no idea how to do like whatever has to be done here. Or the person that I'm working with might be taking over the workflow. So if they're taking over the workflow, I might just leave a placeholder note here to say, hey, I've built out my first section. I'm stuck over here. Give me a hand, or this is where you take over. So finish off this workflow. Now, that's the use case for collaboration. It's very, very popular. Now, another reason why I personally use sticky notes is when I'm working on client workflows and I'm like handing it off to the client, even though I'm the only person managing that workflow for them, I just want to remember what I've built out and like what's going on in a workflow. There might be like 5 or 10 workflows for one client. I might have 10 clients. So if I have 100 workflows, like how can I quickly come into the workflow, get up to speed with what's going on? What are the integrations here? If I was stuck myself and I'm going to be fixing it later, like what's happening? Also, if I want to be introducing new routes and like kind of keep modifying the build, I kind of leave breadcrumbs for myself to come back and understand exactly what's going on. So we have collaboration, we have personal use and like client handover. And then another use case for sticky notes is if you're actually building your workflow for the first time and you want to introduce some kind of governance into it. So let's say when you're testing with your test variables in a test environment, you might be actually triggering the workflow from the execute workflow node. By the way, this node is literally top 9 most used nodes, the manual trigger node. So in this case, I might get a sticky note, and while I'm building this out in this testing environment, so let's just go testing, and I will just bring this across like this, and I'll explain, where the variables come from for the testing mode, what we currently need to do, or even just to highlight, hey, this node, this way that you start the workflow is just for testing. Then I might actually have a production ready node, which is when I've done my testing, I already know how my production is going to be going. So I might have a trigger that is coming from something like Gmail. Let's just find the Gmail node. Gmail, go into our triggers, and then maybe on a new message received. And then now I know this is my production. It's going to be from my production environment. So right production here, I flick it into here as well. And now you can see my workflow. It's ready to be tested, or when I'm done testing it, I already know what my production state's going to be as well. So these are some of the most common use cases for sticky notes. And now that we understand like how to use them, how to apply them to the workflow, let's actually start understanding about what's possible, like what's the formatting options that we have available to us. So the first thing we see on the n8n sticky note documentation is, sticky notes allow you to annotate and comment on your workflows. n8n recommends heavily to use sticky notes on template workflows to help others understand your workflow. So this is all about collaboration. So we're not just speaking about template workflows. We're now looking at like personal workflows that we're doing for for clients, production ready ones, or even for ourselves. Always use sticky notes. They're really good to kind of leave logs of what's going on, what you need to do for yourself. I actually even do it for my personal workflows. I got sticky notes everywhere. So let's scroll down, and I want to bring our attention to, Markdown. So when you're writing on sticky notes, they're actually written in Markdown format, and that's what gives you the ability to have like thicker text for different headings. If you want to do asterisks, so basically all the styling within the actual sticky note itself, as well as any hyperlinks or videos or images that you want to add. So you can literally just copy this. Let's go to our workflow. Let's go into this one. Let's backspace everything that's here and paste in this sticky note. So you can see, let's just expand this. We have a bunch of different formatting options here. We have just regular text with this bolded over here a little bit. We have the H1, H2, H3. We have an example of a link that we can click. We have bullets, and then we have numbered lists. Back in our documentation, we also have the ability to introduce images and also embed videos. So you guys can explore that a little bit later on. But what's really cool is that you can just chat with the docs, and you can just say something like, create me a sticky note for a workflow that'll process new emails in a Gmail inbox. And now this AI, which is trained on the resources from n8n documentation, will be able to help us get that process started. So let's copy this, go across to our sticky note. Let's backspace everything, paste this in. And now let's just fix up the very end of it, which is, we don't need this at all. For more details, go to see this documentation. And then I think up a little bit here, here's a sticky note. So let's just remove all this stuff. That's just from the general AI response. But now if we paste this here, we literally have an initial instruction set for how to run this specific workflow. We could have given more information into that chatbot so we could understand a little bit better. But as you see here, it's already a nicely structured sticky note for ourselves, following all the principles of Markdown format, and then being able to go across to different hyperlinks. So let's actually click on this and see where it takes us. There we go. We've got some information about how to use the Gmail trigger node. And then over here, the node message operations as well. So it actually takes us to different documentation to make sure when we hand this over, people are also familiar with how to use this. Okay, so I think we spent enough time looking at these sticky notes. The next thing we want to look at is the HTTP request. So this is when you want to make API calls. Let's go across to here. Let's actually bring something onto the canvas. We got the HTTP request. There we go. Okay, so the HTTP node allows you to communicate with third-party systems. So think of things like Facebook or Instagram, Slack for chatting, Salesforce or HubSpot for like salesy stuff, Zendesk for customer support, ClickUp for task management. All these different third-party systems. If you ever want to build a workflow where you can actually like speak out to that specific system, you typically do that by using a HTTP node. At a high level, there's a bunch of different methods. So a method is essentially a way of communication. Just like if I've got a phone call, I can place a call, I can receive a call, I can send a text message, I can receive a text message. Well, with an API call or this HTTP request node, you can make a call to delete something, to get something, to send something somewhere, to update something. So all different methods of actually interacting with these third-party systems. And then the next thing is this URL. So the URL is like the phone number for the mobile phone. Usually the URL tends to be pretty specific to the system that you're interacting with. So this is like the endpoint or the specific address that you want to target with this HTTP call. Authentication, just like when you go into your Facebook and you can't just go into your friend's Facebook without giving the email and password. Authentication is just a way to increase security for HTTP nodes when you're interacting with these third-party systems. Then you have a bunch of different settings here, like sending headers, which basically dictate the format of communication. And then you have a body, which if you ever want to make a change to one of these third-party systems, you send the body, and the body typically includes the instructions of what you want to do. All right, so let's actually take this baby for a run and let's just create an API call together. So I'm actually going to be doing a web search API by using Perplexity. And a really cool way to actually create these API calls is by clicking on this import curl. So curl command is basically a standardized description of how the API call is formatted. So across in the Perplexity API documentation, let me just zoom in a little bit. We have the chat completions endpoint, and this is for generating a response. Basically, search the web and generate a response to a question. On the right-hand side over here, we have the documentation for how to actually make this API call. And we can see all these really cool things like the method, which is post, which is this stuff that we're looking at here. So it's a post request. Then we have the specific endpoints, that URL, the specific address. We have the header for the authentication, so like the password and username. Another header to explain the format of this API call. And then the data is just the body part, the very end, which is where we're basically describing the instructions for the API call of what we want to do. So in this case, we're going to be sending a set of instructions for what do we want to search on the web. Now, it's already set to curl. We can just copy this curl request like this. And back in n8n, let's go into this import curl. Let's paste this into here, and I'm just going to click import. And now this functionality is going to strip away all those instructions and then paste them into this HTTP call, so we can actually use this API call. Now, everything is pretty much set to go. Just the two things we want to change are, one, our authorization. So we've got the bearer, and then we have this value that we need to put into here, which is the API token. Actually, we're missing one of the headers. We also had this header over here for content type. Okay, there we go. So this is a little bit debugging while we're flying through this demo. We want to add another header, so I'm going to go add parameter, and I'm going to say this is content type, and I'm going to come back into here and say application JSON. So I don't really use the curl request myself. I just like building out the API call manually because you avoid these little things. Like, I mean, I'm pretty familiar with API calls, but if you weren't familiar, you might put it into here and just not understand why it's not working. So yep, first thing is the API token that we need to get. And then scrolling down here in the body, how many stars are there in a galaxy? We might want to change this dynamically by using the AI model to basically choose for us what the question is that we want to search. So we're just going to be starting off by getting our API key. And to do that, I'm in my Perplexity account. Let's go to create API key. I'm just going to call this test create key. Awesome. Let's copy the value, go back in n8n, and let's paste this here. And now if I just go to execute step, it should actually make the API call and just do that stars question. What was it? How many stars are there in a galaxy? So let's bring this out. Let's wait for this API call to be finished. And we have, okay, citations. So all the different websites that were visited to get the answer. And then the actual answer here. Wait, no, this is actually some more search results. Where's the answer, guys? Content, there we go. Role assistant content. There are approximately 100 to 400 billion stars in the Milky Way. Okay, so now let's say we want to plug this to an assistant. So let me just get this assistant out of here. Sorry, guys, I want to break up the workflow. Soz about that. Let's bring this. Okay, so yeah, now I don't know why I was a little bit of a silly goose there. So if you want to make a HTTP request for your AI agent node, you cannot just use the standard node that goes onto the canvas. You have to use the HTTP request tool, which is a circle shape versus a square shape. Let me just quickly take all this information from here and paste it into here. Okay, and I'm done. So I literally just copied everything across. Post method, that endpoint, the two headers for authorization, and then my API key stuff, content type, and then the body at the very bottom. Now, the only thing is that now that it's plugged into this AI agent, let's just get the AI model here as well. It's plugged into the agent, but it's not dynamic. Right now, it's a static API call, because if we ever shoot off on this tool, we don't have, like, this is going to be, literally, this is going to be sent every single time. So if you're building a customer support agent for your team, it's only going to be asking how many stars are there in a galaxy, and I don't think that's going to be the right answer for your customer support. So what you want to do is, there's actually two ways that you can do this. The first way, which is basically copying this entire JSON, saying, let the AI model decide, adding a description here. And now we're basically saying, let the parent agent decide what the body is meant to be. And we're giving a description of how the body should look so it knows. But instead of this, I'm going to dynamically say user question, for example. Then I can placeholder it like this. Now, this is one way of dynamically inserting the question from the AI into this search. So you can actually just search whatever you want to search. But another way is to use the from AI function. Okay, so now we're in the from AI documentation for n8n. And basically, on activating this button, the AI agent will fill in the expression for you. So from an AI is an expression that will dynamically allow the agent to kind of insert a question, a text, some kind of value or input. And it can be as simple as this. So it's the from AI function, and then you have some kind of variable that you need the agent to fill out. If you want to add some more descriptions into it, you actually have some more possibility of what to include in that function. So no matter what, you must always have the main parameter, so the main key that is like compulsory, and that's always a string. A string is just like a free text, like a sentence of text. It can be a word or it can be multiple words or like a sentence. If you want to give more specificity, if you want to make it more specific for your agent, you can also include the description, the type of variable that you want, and a default value in case it returns nothing. You might want to have like a fallback variable. For type, you can actually have the specific output that the agent brings in. You can make it a string, which is the word or a bunch of words, numbers only, Boolean, which is a true or false, or JSON if it's going to be like a bunch of different variables in a packaged format. But that always just flattens down to a string. So an example here is you have from AI and you have the name. So the agent's going to be giving you the name. So let's say our parent agent in n8n was working with Bart. That's what he would insert into here. Then the description of where to pull the name from, what format the actual delivery of that of the name should be in. So it's a string, and then a fallback in case he can't realize that he's speaking with Bart, he's going to just say, okay, Jane Doe as the fallback name. So in our case, we're going to be using a from AI function. Let's actually get the chat to help with this. So I've just written, hey, documentation from n8n. I'm building an API call in the HTTP node. I need a from AI function. I think I just said this in the wrong order, but I need a from AI function to basically fit into here. Like what's the from AI function that I can just copy and paste? So let's see what it does here. I think sometimes from AI functions might be a little bit confusing. I don't really use them too much. So yeah, I'll probably struggle doing this just by hand. Let's see what it gives out for us. So we have this user question, the question to ask. Okay, let me just get this thing all the way to the very end here. And it's given us the entire from AI function, which is really cool. So back in n8n, if we just go back to the original setting of just using the JSON and putting the JSON here, we're not actually using this, let the model define it over here. We're just going to come into here, remove the actual question, and then paste in our from AI. Let's go across to expression, and it's going to dynamically insert into here. So now we have the user question that's going to be inserted into this API web search, and it's the question that the user wants to ask, and the format's going to be a string. So it's like a series of words. All right, so now let's test it out. So I've just got a node plugged into the AI agent so that I can actually trigger it. And then for the agent input message, I'm just saying, what is the weather in Melbourne? That's the question we essentially want to search using the Perplexity API. And then for my system instructions, I've just got use the tool to answer the question, which is a very high quality set of system instructions. Let's see what the answer is. Okay, and there we go. The current weather in Melbourne is it's sunny with areas of morning frost. Let's actually make sure that the API call asks the correct question. So how do we actually just see this? Let's open this up. What is the weather in Melbourne? So using this from AI function that was literally just generated by the AI on the n8n documentation, we didn't have to worry about it. We just gave it the instructions that we needed, and it created a function for us. And then it searched the correct sources. So we've got the Bureau of Meteorology, goodness gracious me, and then a bunch of search results, and then the answers. And that's how the AI agent was able to pull out what the weather in Melbourne is right now. Okay, so now that we looked at the first two most popular nodes, what do we have? Sticky node and HTTP request. We now have the set node. Okay, let's go into the set node straight away then. So we've got the agent response over here in the specific output. Let's say a very easy example of the set node. Let's just type in set into here. Instead of having the output variable defined as output, let's just say we want to map this to something called weather. And now we have the value, which is just this thing. So if we now bring this here and execute this, very silly example, but now we basically changed we're mapping a new variable with an answer or some kind of input. So in this case, yes, it is weather. Now, another really cool use case for this edit fields, there's actually a bunch of different use cases. The next use case is if you ever want to get the current time, current date, whatever you want to do. Same thing for this. So you can actually use built-in time and date methods to bring the current date, the current time into your n8n workflow. Sometimes it's important, like if you've got a customer support workflow and you've got an SMS assistant, you might not want to SMS people after business hours or outside of business hours at like 9 or 10 p.m. at night. It's just a little bit weird. So you could have a check in your workflow to see, hey, is it within business hours? If it is, send a message. If it's not within business hours, do not send a message. Just wait until it's like 9 a.m. and then text them. So let's get this now method. And back in our workflow, let's open up double squiggly bracket. Let's go now. And over here, you can see the actual time and date of what is currently the time zone that's attached to this workflow. So that's a really important thing. So we have now, but my time zone for this specific workflow, my actual entire workspace time zone is not my Melbourne time zone. For some reason, I've just let it be default to Europe, Berlin, but I'm not in Berlin right now. I am in Melbourne, which, okay, there is not there. I think that Sydney is my next, Sydney is my next closest one. So if you are going to use time and date in your workflows, you can actually change the time zone per workflow. If you are building something for your client, just make sure that, wherever that system is operating in, it's the appropriate time zone. Then you can just save this, and that's going to be reflected across to the actual time and date of your now variable. So this is really cool because now this means on the output, so on the right-hand side here, we have the actual weather of Melbourne, and then we have the current time and date, which we can plug into like an AI agent step and say, hey, if the user is messaging on this specific date between these hours, give them a coupon or something like that. Now, I'm going to actually keep skipping across to the next node. So we have the edit fields node for setting variables, for bringing new variables into the canvas, for example, that like current time and date. But what I want to speak about is actually the code node. Above all else, I don't really use the set node too much. I use the code node a lot. The if node, I use it sometimes, but I typically use the switch node more. So, I mean, this might not be your top 5 that you use, but yeah, just cool to see anyway. So for the code node, you can essentially do the exact same thing with the actual data manipulation nodes by using the code node. Just the only thing is the code node is you've got to code it out yourself versus these are like pre-configured templates that you just apply and it does one specific task for you. So let's say I wanted to do the exact same thing with the code node. Then what I would do is just get the code node over here. Actually, before we do that, let me just make this a more complicated output, because I mean, just using a code node for one variable is very simple. Let's just make a new output here. Okay, so I'm just going to say, just like before, use the tool to answer the user's question, but when you're outputting your response, give us a couple more variables, a couple more keys into the response. The first is the actual response for the user's question, then what language is it, and then what is the intent as well. So it's just going to be making up some of this stuff here for us. Let's execute this. And now, again, we just want to have more variables to work with so we can actually see the power of the code node. Okay, nice. Now it's a little bit hairier. So we still have one output variable here, but you can see it's like nested with a response. Then we have language over here, and then intent over here. So we've got 3 different variables, within this one package of information that we want to break up using this code node. So actually, and just to show you why this is pretty cool, if you just pull this into the set node and we go over here, you can't really pull out those 3 different variables from the AI node. So okay, let's imagine that we have to use the code node for this. Then I'm going to copy this entire thing and I'm going to go across to ChatGPT. So all I've written is I'm in n8n, write me a code node for n8n. I doubled down on the n8n thing because sometimes it doesn't realize that you're within the n8n, like the guardrails of n8n, and it writes you code that you cannot actually use. So I'm within n8n, take this output that I literally just copied from the canvas and parse it to break up all those 3 variables into accessible variables now. So let's hit run. Okay, cool. So now we have our output. Okay, so let's paste it into here. And now we'll just go execute step. And then on the right-hand side, let's now go into this set node actually. And let's look at these separate variables. So we have the response, which is the AI weather response. Let's take this, let's backspace it and put it into here. Cool. And then we can actually map our language as well. I mean, we don't really need to set these variables like this because since they're already broken up into these 3 variables by using the code node, they already exist on the canvas anyway. But just for demonstration, intent, and then get weather. And if we just hit execute, now on the right-hand side, we just have those variables again. So yeah, it's not really worth it for us to actually remap these variables, but at least now you see how the system works. All right, and now our final node to look at is the if node. So the if node is a very common like logic node, which basically you input some data into it, and then it makes a decision for you. So I've actually had to restart the workflow because something happened over here and my canvas started screwing up. So let me just bring on the same details onto the canvas. So we're just asking what is the weather. We'll bring it into the code node, and then we're putting it into the edit fields node. So now if we just go to the if node, and this is a really easy way for us to make like a basic decision to split the workflow either to path A or path B, we can say something like, well, we have weather over here. We have the current time, the language, the intent. Okay, so I actually got a really good one here. Let's say we've got a customer support workflow and we want to be able to distinguish between, or basically pipe into different agents based on language. So now that we have this language variable over here, which is equal to English, if we have this equal to English, we will output true. Otherwise, we're going to output false. So if I execute the step, it's going to take the true branch. And And then you see over here that the live wire is the true wire, which means the information is going to be continuing down here. And I'm just going to get a do nothing just to show that like we're taking this specific route. Okay, and do nothing, let's execute this, and it does nothing, and then the information is still carried across. Some little nuance here. If we go lowercase e, by the way, and we execute this step, it's going to go to the false branch. It's got false because it's not an exact match. It actually has to be like uppercase e spelled the exact same way as this. So it's like it has to be the exact same. So we have the English thing. But some other cool things we can do are sometimes you want to know if a variable exists or not. If a variable doesn't exist, you might want to retry the actual workflow. If the output is null, if the output is completely empty, that might be a signal for you to actually take a different route. So let's say we take this weather variable. Well, we've got a bunch of different options here that we can actually check with. So we're dealing with a string. Now, like we were mentioning at the start of this video, you have a bunch of different formats that you can do with the from AI, which is you had number, which is just using actual digits only. You had strings, which are words or like sentences, bunches of like text. You had Boolean, true and false, but in this case, you also have like decisions based on does it exist, does it not exist? And then you have some different data formats as well. In this case, we're dealing with a string. So you also have these other options of like exists. So right now we can execute this step because it does exist. It's going to take the true branch. But let's see if we can try and make this weather thing false. So is empty. Okay, so if it's empty, let's see what happens here. It's going to take the false branch because it's not empty. So this statement is not true. So take the false branch. So that means it does not exist. We just tried it. Actually exists. So if it does exist, it takes the true branch. Let's now do something like contains. Okay, so if the weather contains the word, let's say Sydney, which it shouldn't because we're asking for the Melbourne weather, and that's false because the word Sydney does not appear in this text at all. So, I mean, for this example, it's kind of like hard for us to see why we would be able to filter out by word. But there's a bunch of different use cases where this if node is pretty valuable. So we have does not start with, ends with something specific, does not end with, matches regular expression, does not match regular expression. So a bunch of different ways that you can actually kind of check or basically confirm if statements are true. So you can take a true branch or a false branch. If you're working with numbers, once again, if there was a response, does it exist? Does it not exist? Is that specific value empty? If you want to go, okay, this might be an interesting one. So if we go for this current time and date, and then we go down to here and we say time and date. If the time and date exists, it should take the true because it actually does exist. If the time and date is, let's say, is after, and let's bring this onto the canvas just so I can make this equation finish. So this is the current time and date. Let me backspace this. And for this statement, I want to check if this is 23. Let's make that 40. So this should be in the future. So this should be actually a false branch. Okay, so the current time and date is 23:30 or whatever it was before, and I've just bumped up the time by like 10 minutes and actually taken the false branch because it's not after this time. So you can see you've actually got a bunch of different data types that you can compare against. One that I like to use is actually this, does it exist or does it not exist, as a check to basically see if I should retry that part of the workflow. All right, guys, and that was it. So that was a very quick deep dive into the top 5 nodes for n8n. If you want to see a part 2 with the next top 5 nodes, please let me know in the comments below. And if you don't already know, I've actually started a school community very recently, like a few weeks ago. It's still growing. And very interestingly, I've taken all these workflows that I've been able to get from the n8n space, which is 5,700 workflows, and I'm working on a really cool project with the community right now. So it's like a 5-part series that I'm working on by using this specific set of workflows. If you want to be a part of that, I welcome you into the community. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next one. See you guys.